This is Lesson 5A in Module 5. The topic of this lesson is Network Tools. After completing this lesson, students should be able to list some common tools used by network administrators. Additionally, some common commands that run useful applications such as ping. Using the tools and commands discussed in the lesson, determine the owner of an IP address or website. Using the tools and commands discussed in the lesson, determine the IP address for a given website. Using either Nmap or a tool such as ZenMap, conduct one of several different scans of a system. And finally, students should be able to use Wireshark to view network traffic. The first thing we want to look at is Whois. Whois allows you to look up a domain to see who the owner of the domain is. The way this works is to go to the website www.whois.com/whois, and in the search location enter a name such as Amazon.com. The information that you can obtain includes the owner of the domain, who registered it, and when. It also includes when the registration expires, the contact information for the registrant, the administrative contact, and the technical contact. You can also enter an IP address to see who is the owner of that specific address. You can accomplish this by entering the IP address you are interested in learning about in the same search location as you did for a domain name at whois.com/whois. Here is a few partial screen captures of an example of some of the information that you can obtain from conducting a Whois search, in this case on Amazon.com. Displayed are just two portions of the information that will be supplied. In this case, some of the domain information and who the registrant was. Notice that the contact information includes an address, both a phone number and a fax number, and an email address. Go ahead and try this yourself to see all of the information that you can find on the whois.com website. Here's an example of looking up the owner of an IP address. In this case, I picked a random IP address to see who might own it. I entered the IP address in the search field at whois.com/whois, and this was the information it returned. You can try this on some IP addresses yourself to get a feel for the command and how it works.
Traceroute, also known as tracert, is a program generally invoked from a command line that will send a packet out to track the route it takes through the network until it gets to its destination. It uses ICMP packets to record the route through the internet from one device to another. This can be useful when gathering information on an IP address to get a feel for where it might be located and what other systems are along the path. Traceroute is a simple tool and can be invoked by other tools.
Here's an example of using Traceroute to trace the path from my home to Broadway Burger Station's website. Notice that I use the tracert command to run this trace. If you are on a Windows machine, which I was when I did this, you should bring up a command line window by typing command prompt in the search box at the bottom of the screen. If you have not used the search field in Windows to pull up a command prompt, here is a screen capture of doing this on my machine. Notice I typed in command prompt at the bottom left of the screen, and Windows found what I wanted to do and displayed my options. I can then pull up a command prompt window by clicking on the command prompt option at the top. Once I click on the command prompt option in the previous slide, Windows provides me a command prompt window which looks like the screen capture from my machine. You can then enter the commands you want to run at the C:" prompt. You can do this to run tracert or some other commands which we will shortly be looking at. Here is another example, this time tracing the route to grants.gov, which is a website the federal government maintains to list open grant opportunities. Notice that several times the step timed out. Eventually it made it all the way. If there are more than 30 hops, the trace will be suspended. The ping command is used to test the ability for a system to connect to another system. In other words, is the target system reachable from your system? This is often used on networks for troubleshooting purposes. Ping will send packets to the target and record the time that it takes for the target system to respond. Ping utilizes the echo request option in an ICMP packet. And the ping command will also resolve, if it's possible, the host name. Here is an example of using the ping command to check connectivity to Amazon.com. It sent 4 packets and received 4 packets back, displaying the time it took to receive the responses each time. It then also provides a summary of the minimum, maximum, and average round-trip times. Notice also that it provided us with the IP address for the target system. If we wanted to check whether the IP address was correct that we received, we can again turn to Who Is and check the IP address we were given. Here is a screen capture of the information returned from the Who Is check. As you can see, it is indeed an address for Amazon. Nmap is an open source tool that is used by many to check networks for a variety of things. It was designed to rapidly scan large networks. Nmap uses IP packets to determine what hosts are available on a network, what services or applications are running along with their version available on the hosts, what operating systems are running on the hosts, and their versions. It will also help with determining what type of packet filters or firewalls are being used. Nmap is often used for security audits and assessments, but can also be used by administrators for network inventory, managing service upgrade schedules, and monitoring host or service uptime. Nmap will provide a list of scanned targets with additional information depending on the options selected. Nmap provides a ports table that lists the port number and protocol, service name, and state. The state can be either open, filtered, closed, or unfiltered.
As mentioned, Nmap can provide a table of ports that provides their current state. These states can be open. Open means that an application on the target machine is listening for connections or packets on that port. Filtered means that a firewall, filter, or other network obstacle is blocking the port so that Nmap cannot tell whether it is open or closed. Closed ports have no application listening on them, though they could open up at any time. Unfiltered ports are classified as unfiltered when they are responsive to Nmap's probes, but Nmap cannot determine whether they are open or closed. From the nmap.org website, we can see a list of half of the options that Nmap offers. Notice how versatile that the tool is and the many different types of scans that can be performed. Look at the different options under areas such as host discovery, scan technologies, port specification and scanned order, and service/version detection. Take a few seconds to look at these different options and come back to explore them some more or go to the nmap.org website. Here is a continuation of the second half of the options Nmap offers. Notice some of the interesting groups listed here, such as OS detection and firewall/IDS evasion and spoofing. Again, take a few seconds to look at the list now, but come back later or go to the nmap.org for a more in-depth look. Let's take a look at some example nmap scans and what they mean. This first one scans all reserved TCP ports on the machine scanme.nmap.org. The -V option enables verbose mode. The second one launches a stealth SYN scan against each machine that is up out of the 256 IPs on the /24 sized network where scanme resides. It also tries to determine what operating system is running on each host that is up and running. It is important to note that this scan, as well as some others, requires root privilege because of the SYN scan and the OS detection options. The last example asks Nmap to choose 100,000 hosts at random and scan them for web servers, port 80. Host enumeration is disabled with the $P_N, since first sending a couple probes to determine whether a host is up is wasteful when you are only probing one port on each target host anyway. These examples provide just a very small introduction to the considerable power of Nmap. Again, go to the nmap.org website for further explanations of these and other commands. Let's take a look at some example scans using Nmap. On a Windows system, Nmap is installed in the /program files 86 and /nmap directory. Following the instructions from nmap.org, they have you scan a site they have set up for testing Nmap to ensure it was downloaded correctly and is working. Here is a scan of scanme.nmap.org showing things such as the open ports and a guess at the operating system running on the system. You can also see that on port 80, they are running the Apache version 2.4.7 web server. Finally, the system said that there are 991 closed ports, and we can count 9 that it found open in the open ports area. Here's a screen capture of ZenMap running on a Windows system. If you don't want to use the command line to run Nmap, you can use ZenMap, which simplifies the situation considerably, especially by providing you a series of different scans you can choose from without having to remember the specific commands. Notice that you just enter the target for your scan. Select which type of scan that you want to conduct from the Profile pull-down menu, then hit the Scan button. Let's try a quick scan. Here is the result of the quick scan that we just asked for. Notice that ZenMap filled in the command for the quick scan that we selected. Results of the scan were not exactly like the one we conducted from the command line, but the command it inserted was different. Let's try a different scan from the pull-down menu and see if we get different results. This time we chose a regular scan. The amount of time it takes to conduct the scan will vary depending on the type of scan you choose. Notice that we now have 991 closed ports reported and 9 ports found to be open, the same as the scan we conducted from the command line. If we check with our scan using the command line, we will find that these are the same 9 ports it found. The services that it believes are running on each of these are also the same. Let's try one more scan. This time we chose the intense scan. It took slightly longer, but you will see that we obtained a lot more information, basically the same information as the command we entered with the command line execution of Nmap. Notice now we obtained the guesses at the OS. Another interesting part of this scan is the trace route. This is a network tool, as mentioned before, that will trace the actual path that a packet took to get from the source to the destination. It also records the time it took. The route can sometimes provide you some useful information in terms of where a connection is being made from. Let's turn now to a tool called Wireshark. Wireshark is a network protocol analyzer that is used by many organizations and administrators. It is actually considered by many to be the de facto standard tool for conducting packet traffic analysis. Wireshark recognizes hundreds of different protocols and allows for a deep analysis of network traffic, including the ability to pick out and trace specific streams of traffic among the many packets that may be flowing through your network. This is an invaluable capability to be able to analyze what is happening on your network and to possibly spot indicators of possible attacks. We will explore this more in a couple slides as we examine some scanning traffic generated by Nmap and examine the traffic to see how we might be able to spot these scans using tools like Wireshark. Wireshark's main window consists of parts that are commonly known for many other GUI programs. The menu located at the top is used to start other actions. The main toolbar provides quick access to frequently used items from the menu. The filter toolbar allows users to set display filters to filter which packets should be displayed. It is important to note that all of these filters are lowercase. So remember that when looking for something like all TCP packets, to type it in as all lowercase TCP. If you don't remember, Wireshark will remind you by having the field appear in red and by displaying a list of the filters which clearly will show TCP in lowercase. The packet list pane is an important section which displays a summary of each packet captured. By clicking on packets in this pane, you control what is displayed in the other two panes. The packet details pane displays the packet selected in the packet list pane in more detail. The packet bytes pane is a really interesting section which displays the data from the packet selected in the packet list pane and highlights the field selected in the packet details pane. The status bar located at the bottom of the screen shows some detailed information about the current program state and the captured data. The packet diagram pane is another interesting display which is not shown here, but is available by choosing it as a preference in the Edit pull-down menu. It displays the packet selected in the packet list in a textbook-style diagram. Let's now take a look at some Nmap scans and how they will look as packets on your network using Wireshark. Here is an example of the use of Nmap to conduct a ping sweep to discover hosts in a given IP address range. This comes from a video available on YouTube, as indicated at the bottom of the screen, and it has accompanying labs that you can use to learn more about Nmap and Wireshark. The scan in this case returned that there are hosts ending with 1, 3, 4, and 2. Here is a Wireshark image of a file of the captured packets for the ping sweep. Notice how this sweep determines if there is a machine with a specific address. It will send out ARP or Address Resolution Protocol requests asking for the machine address for specific IP addresses. This is broadcast to the network so that if the address is for a host on the network that is up, then that machine will respond with its MAC address. Nmap now knows that the host exists. We see here the responses for hosts ending in 1, 4, and 3, which, if you remember, the results we just looked at were 3 of the 4 machines that Nmap reported as existing. A quick note, the link provided will take you to a site that has a video mentioned previously and has a number of packet capture files you can use to examine what is discussed in the video. It also has some additional labs to help you learn to identify specific types of attacks. Let's take a look at another Nmap scan, this time a Connect scan. Here's a screen capture from the same video mentioned before. You can see what the Connect scan consists of. we would expect to see a large number of TCP SYN packets in the traffic, along with reset ACK packets and possibly an occasional SYN ACK. Here is the Wireshark display of the packets captured for the TCP Connect scan. This capture file was with no firewall turned on. Look at the large number of SYN packets interspersed with a number of reset ACK packets. Here is the screen capture of the image showing the command to launch the Connect scan at the top. Notice that the scan tells us that there are 990 closed ports. It also reports a number of ports that did respond and with the suspected service running on it just below the message about the closed ports. It is important to note that in this example, the firewall was not turned on. Had it been turned on, then we would not have gotten these responses. Let's take a look at the TCP traffic related to one of the ports listed as open, port 135. Here we have isolated a stream of TCP traffic heading to port 135. The filter we applied to view just the TCP port 135 traffic is entered here. Notice that the first packet is a SYN packet, as is expected for a TCP connection. Port 135 on our destination IP address of 172.20.1.1 responds with the expected SYN ACK for the second part of the three-way handshake. And finally, our system responds with an ACK to complete the three-way handshake. Notice the next packet in red above is a reset ACK because we really didn't want to do anything with this connection anyway. We just wanted to see if it would respond. This is an example of an open port. It is listening and responding. Here we are filtering to look at entries that had the source IP of 172.20.1.2 and a port equal to 80 for web traffic. We then right-click on one of these entries, the top one in this case, then select Follow in the menu that appears and then select the TCP stream option. This is how we isolated and followed the stream to look at the three-way handshake previously. Here is the resulting isolated stream for the one entry we clicked on in the previous diagram. We now see that in this case the initial SYN packet is sent, but instead of the expected three-way handshake next response of a SYN ACK, we receive a reset ACK. This means that the port is closed. It isn't listening, but it's not being blocked by a firewall. It can be reached, but it is not being utilized. It is not listening because the IP address of 172.20.1.1 is not running a web server. Here is the Wireshark capture of the packets for the TCP Connect scan, this time with the firewall turned on. Notice that the source port is changing each time and that the destination ports are not sent in order. Let's try a different scan, this time a TCP SYN scan. Displayed here is a screen capture from the video where they generated the SYN scan traffic. Notice how it differs from the Connect scan we just looked at. In this case, the SYN scan does not complete the TCP three-way handshake. This is considered to be a little bit more stealthy because it doesn't complete the three-way handshake, but as you will see, it is still noticeable. Here is the result of the SYN scan. Notice that the results are the same as for the connection scan. We found 990 closed ports and 10 open ports, which are listed here. The command to generate this scan in Nmap is shown at the top of the screen. Let's take a look at how this appears in Wireshark. First, here is an image of the captured packets filtered, so it only shows the TCP packets. Notice the simple TCP filter in the filter line. Now, let's look at a couple of specific streams. The stream for port 135 and for port 110. Notice here the first two steps of the three-way handshake took place for port 135, but the connection was not completed. We can see the initial SYN packet. The port then responds with a SYN ACK, but no final ACK is received. Eventually, the SYN ACK is retransmitted, but with no response, the connection will be terminated. Now, let's look at port 110. Notice the first step of sending a SYN is accomplished, but the second step of receiving a SYN ACK is not. Instead, a reset ACK is received. This tells us that there is nothing listening on this port, that it is closed. Just for fun, let's take a look at the packet capture when the firewall is turned on. Notice that the SYNs have been sent, but absolutely no response is received. The takeaway from these images is what certain types of probes or scans look like if you are examining a file of packets that have been captured or traffic occurring in real time. You can see that there are distinct patterns that you can recognize. One of the interesting things here is to also notice that the ports tested are not in order, but rather they jump around. This is an attempt to hide the scans somewhat. Time for another couple of interesting Nmap scans. First, let's see if we can determine the OS that is running on the host. This is again a screen capture from the video of the Nmap session that generated the files we are looking at using Wireshark. To determine the OS, Nmap has a number of different internal tests it accomplishes to see if it can figure it out. Here is the Nmap command and results to see if we can possibly determine the operating system running on a specific target host. Here we attempt this on host 172.20.1.4, and we are told it is running Linux, though we may not be told exactly what version. This is an example of a scan that is just concerned with determining the OS on a host. Remember that in some of our previous more robust scans, this may also have been conducted, but those other scans might alert an administrator of our interest, while this one might go unnoticed. Now for our last scan with Nmap. Let's try a version scan to see if we can determine the specific version of software running on an open port. Like the OS detection, Nmap has a number of different things that it will look for depending on the application to possibly determine the version. Here's the command and results for a version scan. There are some standard ports for common services, but you don't have to run the services on these ports if you don't want to. Here we run a scan against a system and see that port 80 is open and is running Microsoft IIS, and the version is 7.5. The author went back and changed the port IIS was using to port 23 and reran the scan. Notice that Nmap was able to correctly identify that IIS was now on port 23, and it could still identify the version as 7.5.
For this lesson, there are 2 required videos and 2 websites to check out. There are also 3 optional videos. The first is the one used in the lesson. It is several years old, as you can tell with the reference to IIS. There is an interesting video that shows how to install Wireshark and then use it for password sniffing that you might enjoy.
This concludes our look at some tools common for security and network administrators. Time to check your understanding of the material just presented. Which of the following is the best description for what Nmap is and is designed to do? It is an open source tool for network exploration and security auditing. It is an open source tool that will allow you to view ongoing network traffic. It is a commercial tool used to discover the internal layout of networks. It is a popular commercial tool used for discovery of vulnerabilities on hosts. The answer is that Nmap is a very popular open source tool used for network exploration and security auditing. If we were to view a TCP Connect scan in Wireshark, what would we expect to see? Nothing. A TCP Connect scan is a stealthy scan and won't be visible. For open hosts, we would see the normal three-way handshake that takes place. For closed hosts, we'd see the SYN sent and a SYN ACK and then a reset. For open hosts, we'd see the SYN sent and the SYN ACK, but no final ACK. The answer is that for open hosts, we would see the complete three-way handshake take place.
Which command or commands can be used to determine the IP address of a specific domain or website? IP list, ping, who is, or tracert or traceroute? The answer is ping and tracert. To verify this, go back and look at the examples in this lesson and try a few yourself. This concludes Lesson 5A in Module 5.